Hi, and welcome to Visibility Unlimited and Visibility Unlimited Spotlight, the video portion to the podcast, Visibility Unlimited. I'm Leslie Short, your host and the owner of the Kava Group. Today's conversation is very much overdue, and my guest, Fawn Sanchez, is going to really enlighten us and share so much history, and then how it all needs to play out in business. Was that a good enough tease, everyone? Well, guess what? Fawn is amazing. She has an amazing, extensive career, over 10 years. She's with Amazon. She does HR. She's been in the Army. It's HR. But here's what you may or may not be suspecting. She's from the Shoshone Bannock tribe from Fort Hills, Idaho. When we speak about Indigenous, we have a lot of conversations, but do we actually speak to someone who is Indigenous? With that, Fawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's such an honor to be here. And in my traditional language, I would say Bana, which means hello in Shoshone Bannock.
Bana. So if you could share with the listeners and watching more about your tribe and what Indigenous, the breadth of Indigenous. And I know you're not the expert for everyone that's Indigenous. I just want to throw that out there, but if you could share with us.
And thank you for saying that, Leslie. I think it is important to call out that there are so many Indigenous nations and people throughout the world. I think also the term Indigenous is important to identify, and we are certainly not the same. I can't speak for everyone. I'm really just here today to share my own perspective and my own experiences as a Native American and Indigenous person. So to start, Indigenous means the first peoples of any land. And so here in America, those would typically be Native American people. In Canada, we would call them First Nations. We also have Indigenous people throughout other parts of the world, the Māori in New Zealand, the Sami, throughout the world. There's Indigenous people in Japan and France. And I've gotten a lot of really just education about that myself and just learning who else is out there in the world. And one thing I love about learning about Indigenous people is learning about all the similarities in our cultures. We have a lot of things that are very similar, that are really cross-cultural, things like how we share knowledge and how we learn from our ancestors and really what we're doing to preserve and sustain our knowledge for future generations. But then we also face a lot of the same barriers as well with being severely underrepresented. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and just talk and share my perspective. I did want to share a little bit about my tribal nation, if that's okay, the Shoshone Bannock. So Shoshone Bannock is located in Idaho, so southern Idaho, and it's actually comprised of both the eastern and the western bands. So there's northern Shoshone and then there's the Bannock. And so other people might know them as the Northern Paiute bands. Our ancestral lands actually stretch all the way across Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Washington, and then parts of Wyoming, Montana, and even into Canada. So there are quite a few Shoshone Bannock people that also speak French, because we do have a lot of those language characteristics in our language as well. And over the last 200 years, as our language has been written down, you will see a lot of French influence in our language. So I am from the Shoshone Bannock Nation that's located in Fort Hall, Idaho, which is southern Idaho. I actually grew up, though, in La Push, Washington, on the tribal lands of the Quileute, which is near the town of Forks, which you may know from the Twilight movies. When I was growing up there, no one knew where it was. And then I'm actually calling in today from Nisqually, Washington. And so I live on the traditional lands of the Nisqually, just south of Seattle.
Oh, lovely. And so before we jumped on, you said there's 4 different, can you explain this? Is it 4 different tribes within a tribe? Is 4 different, how does that work? I don't want to misspeak.
So, if we go pre-colonial with tribes, a lot of tribes had different ways that they were divided, and a lot of it was tied to the land. And so the Shoshone Bannock is both the western and the eastern bands, and then within that, there's two different nations that are basically on each side of the river. And so it was four different nations that encompassed this land. But then when the government came and placed us on tribal lands, and the Dawes rolls happened in the late 1800s, which basically put us all in a census, and they gave us all very westernized colonial names. Then we were divided into four governmental structured sovereign nations. So there are four tribes. You can enroll in both northern and southern, in either northern or southern Shoshone-Bannock. So they are very different. They do speak different languages as well. And so the northern is where you might see a little bit more French influence in the language. And I do know some Shoshone-Bannock. I'm more fluent in Ute, which is another related language from a sister tribe that my grandmother's also a member of.
I love that. I love the history. And it is sad that the history is not being truly shared. Just a
That's
quick
correct.
question before we move on. When you said you can join both?
I'm sorry, I meant you can join one or the other. So in the United States, you can only register or enroll in only one tribe. And every tribe has different requirements for being able to enroll in their tribe. I'm actually not enrolled in any tribe because I'm actually three different tribes. And so there's different requirements, and none of them will count all of my blood, if that makes sense. You have to be over a certain amount in just one of them. So plenty of Native American people are not enrolled. I will call that out when we are recruiting Native American people, or there are talent programs or mentorship programs that are dedicated to Native American people. It's really important to not use the verbiage enrolled or tribal members, because a lot of people would think that they then don't qualify for those programs. And that certainly shouldn't be the case. There are certainly some things that are maybe centric to just the tribe that should be just for those particular tribal members. But when we think of the tech industry and large corporations, there's really no reason to differentiate there.
Oh, I love that. That was an amazing transition. I don't think anyone, I need you to say, I just need you to say again, don't say enrolled in a tribe if you are looking to hire or engage Indigenous employees.
Yes.
What would be the best, because I want someone to really walk away and have zero excuse to make errors moving forward.
Yeah.
What would you, your HR, what do you advise?
Yeah, I do read a lot of documentation with different policies ranging from mentorship and talent acquisition and recruiting. There are other ways you can put it. You can say people that identify as Native American, people that have tribal affiliation, and really just leave it at that. Culturally, enrollment is not something that we like to talk about. It's not something that we chose. The government did choose to enroll us and place us on these tribal lands. And while it is important for some things, it's just not something that we need to be requiring for employment purposes. So again, tribal affiliation, identifying as Native American are great ways to find the talent.
I love that. I noticed that you are responsible for the Indigenous group within Amazon. So I was surprised to actually see that. Unfortunately, you don't really see it in companies. So what does that entail?
Yes, I'm president of Amazon's Indigenous Peoples Employee Resource Group. We call them affinity groups at Amazon. A lot of companies do have Indigenous Peoples ERGs. A lot don't, as you pointed out, Leslie. There's a lot of ERGs for other communities, and sometimes we tend to be wrapped up in other ones, or they're just simply not there. I think the reason behind that is ERGs are typically employee-led, so they're started by employees that work at those companies. And if anybody's led an ERG, you also know that it's usually a voluntary effort. So it's something that you're doing off the side of your desk. So you really need talent there that has reached this point in their career trajectory where they can take time to volunteer for this activity that takes a lot of time and bandwidth away. And so if that talent is not there in these large corporations, you're not going to have people to lead these affinity groups. So ours at Amazon is about 5 years old. It was started by some Native American employees who really wanted to just find ways to connect with other Native American employees that had similar shared experiences. Once they sat down and really started writing out the tenets and the goals, they realized that what they were hoping to support the employees with really translated again to a lot of those other Indigenous communities that had very similar barriers and limitations, but also similar cultural characteristics where they might live in multi-generational households. They might be first generation college graduates. And so we did decide at Amazon to name the group Indigenous at Amazon. So we do include people from all over the world. And we have about 3,000 members. Our chapters are in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and we're just launching a chapter for Pacifica people as well. And we've also launched in Mexico. So it's very, very diverse.
Wow. I love that. That's what I was going to ask. How diverse was this? Or is this in one office at this time? Here's always my biggest thing with affinity groups, and I won't get on my soapbox about that. And I understand that, yes, one, it's another job on top of the job. That's the first thing. Two, I always say if there's not a conduit, then at some point, everyone's speaking to each other about the obstacles that a job may have or their career may have. But if it doesn't go all the way to the top, if leadership does not understand what's being discussed and the issues that need to be addressed, then everyone's just sitting at a table talking to each other and nothing gets done.
Absolutely.
And so I hope that there's that conduit somewhere in there.
Yeah, I try to talk to a lot of other affinity group leads and here in I would say the tech industry, anybody that leads an Indigenous ERG is very close. We have a lot of channels of communication, whether it's on LinkedIn or Discord. We have Facebook groups. If anybody wants those, please just contact me and I will add you, because there's not that many of us out there and we really do need to learn from each other. And I've been through the experience of growing a what is now a very large ERG. And I can say, I think we probably have one of the largest out there just because of the size of our company. So certainly a lot of lessons to share, a lot of things that we've gone through, a lot of lessons learned. I do think an important part there with any ERG is having executive sponsorship and having somebody in the senior level leadership team who does support you. We do have that. So we have an executive sponsor that does help us to escalate issues that we really need help with. Some of these issues might be outside of my line of business. So I, have zero influence on things like, the website or on video, for example. So if there's something we need to escalate, I do need help sometimes reaching those lines of business. Also things like getting budgets and supporting large global events, on-site events, helping hourly employees to be able to access these events. Those things are really important. So having that support within the senior leadership teams is really critical.
Absolutely. When the conversation happens and it's among yourselves within the group, what are maybe two or three of the biggest barriers that they feel is happening within?
I think one of the biggest barriers that I see is underrepresentation in senior levels. We do see this not just for Native American and Indigenous people, but for all Black, Latino, and Native American women and people with disabilities. We do see that lack of representation in senior levels. And I'm talking about all industries here, especially the tech industry, where these populations are already very severely underrepresented. So it's easy to have, as an affinity group, it's easy to have things like coffee chats and happy hours, and those are the fun events, right? But when you start looking at things like mentorship programs, you really need that representation in those senior levels, because otherwise the bulk of the work does fall to a very small workforce that is fulfilling those roles. And you just don't have the support that you need amongst leadership. So lack of representation, I think, is one. I think, and it's sort of an evil cycle. You want to grow the talent within, but you need mentorship programs and programs to help people promote within their roles or within the company, or skill build and grow into different roles. But we also want to hire that talent straight out into those roles as well. So let's see, you asked for two. So I think representation. I think also just the types of roles that we're in. A lot of this talent that we're talking about is in support roles, which are program managers, talent acquisitions, HR, administrative assistants. We're not typically in the highly technical roles. And this means when there are things like layoffs, we are the first that's impacted. So you might be doing a lot of great work, but we don't always have that consistency there.
I had that conversation today because someone said to me, I said, I looked on your site. I don't see any senior management, any leadership, one woman, not one person of color, any kind of color
Yes,
there. I don't see anyone with a visible disability. Not saying that there's not someone there that has an invisible disability. So, what's happening? Why would I want to partner with you? Why would I want to share your
a
company?
fair question.
And they said to me, "Oh, well, we have someone in the support team." And I said,
Right.
"You should be ashamed of saying that to me."
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that person doesn't count. They absolutely count. But do they count to you? Do they have a valid voice? Do they even have a voice?
Yeah.
Or is that a checkbox? Because you said you had one, and I don't know the last time anyone ate one M&M or one potato chip. So that's not counting.
And the appearance of equity is tokenism. If you look at the definition of tokenism, it's the appearance of equity. If you have just one person, they are likely in that position where they're mentoring everybody. If they're a woman that's a senior level, they are so maxed out on mentoring so many people. They're the one that's asked to do all the speaking panels. They have to do it because that's their role. They know that. Um, but it is the appearance of equity. I do think it makes a big difference when you have allies that are super supportive that maybe aren't in your community. This is a really simple example, but I get asked all the time to do land acknowledgements. And I always tell people, I think it's more impactful sometimes coming from you or from a senior vice president that's, a male, non-native, non-indigenous person, because everyone knows I care about the land and I care about indigenous people, but they don't know that you do.
Right.
And so allies are very important. But if you don't have that representation, you're missing out on all of these lived experiences that no matter what a great ally you are, you can never understand, you can never emulate. And that's why it's so important to have representation, is that you have that diversity of thought. You have people that can represent their experiences and their communities, and you just can't replicate that.
No, not at all. And that's why I think I started out with saying it's great that we speak about Indigenous. It's like this fairyland. We open up a book and it's like, oh, Indigenous people, I want to be there. And I'm like, but baby, you are there. You are right here. When's the last time you had a conversation? Do you understand about tribes? Do you understand that there's so many languages? All the things that you imparted today, plus there's so much more than that. And yet, to me, I'm like, I don't only need you to be an ally to have my back, but I need you to be more of a champion and an advocate, that you
Yes.
have some of the knowledge of understanding from which tribe I'm part of or what culture, why my culture is important, not only to me, but to the larger scheme of business. And if that's the only way that your mind can think, then make it about business.
Right. Exactly. And Leslie, you actually made me think of something when you said, it's like people are like, wow, when they meet an indigenous person or a native person. I mean, one, can I point out that usually I'm the first native person people have ever met. And sometimes I'm the only one that they've ever met. One, that comes with a lot of pressure. But two, Native American culture is very popular. It's very popularized. It's commercialized. It's sexualized. And I just don't speak for only Native culture here. I can speak for a lot of Indigenous cultures. A
Right.
lot of women of color who are just sexualized and commercialized in the media and in ads and in fashion. We see a lot of cultural appropriation. And that's what people know about our cultures. But what they don't know is things like the digital divide and the barriers that we have even today in accessing the technology that we need as professionals to move ahead in our careers. So they don't understand that perhaps we are first generation college graduates and we're still supporting multi-generational households. So it is very popularized in culture. I do think that's why it's important to have that representation within any industry, because then you have people there that come from these backgrounds. One, you are kind of burdened with the, the burden of having to educate everyone
Always.
constantly. Right. But you can make sure that your products are really inclusive. And, great examples of that are anybody that sells, clothing or textiles, and
I
just
was
making
about
sure that you're not appropriating that.
That's exactly where I was going because I worked in
Mhm.
the fashion industry. And
Yes.
I swear I have to say, every time it's 7th on 6th, which is the huge fashion show, or any fashion week, fashion month, whether it's here or in Europe, or it's Halloween, I always put out a notice, please, please do not
Yes.
pick costumes because you think it's sexy with zero
Thank
context to it.
you.
This is not a costume. This is someone's culture. This is someone's
Mhm.
heritage. And when I'm working with educators in school, which I do the Board of Education, I say in advance, will you please share with your students and with the parents that these are costumes that are not appropriate? Can we just
Leslie, that is so important. And I agree so much. Thank you so much for doing that. The Halloween costumes is I get asked about that a lot. Like, what do you really feel about that? And I can say it's annoying, of course, but it's more than just annoying. Things like Halloween costumes that appropriate culture are harmful. It is harmful to our people because Native American Native American women experience violence at a rate higher than any other ethnicity. We are 10 times more likely to be murdered than a non-Native woman. 85% of Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. And I do believe, and studies show, that a lot of this is because of the sexualization of our culture in popular media. You have figures like Pocahontas, you have, the popular fashions out there that are really sexualizing our women. And that is a big part of it. But those are the things that people don't want to recognize or don't want to experience when they're just popularizing our culture. So I do think that's really important.
I always say, and I say it about the African American culture, and there was another article today with someone appropriating to be a Muslim woman. And
Awful.
and she hit everybody. Woman, she was supposed to be Muslim, she was supposed to be LGBT, part of the LGBT community, like this woman and everything, and she's taking the jobs, and it was going back and forth. And what I said is, everyone wants to be part of,
Yes, but not be.
because when you have to be, you have to take all the
Yeah.
good with a whole lot of bad indifference, and your tolerance is very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
And
yes, go ahead, please.
oh no, sorry to interrupt. I just, before we move on from the fashion part, I just want to call out I am wearing a beautiful silk robe from the Native American fashion designer Bethany Yellowtail. And I always try to wear something from a fashion designer or something from my culture just to help drive conversation. But if you look at this beautiful pattern, it's a lot of different colors, the geometric shapes. These things are really popular on the runway. But to Bethany Yellowtail, these shapes and these colors mean something to her. They could come from her family. They could be generations of stories just woven into the design. And so when we see people replicating that, they're taking something that's not theirs.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I really, listeners and watchers, I really hope you heard that you're taking something from a culture that has history, even if it's only to the designer and her family. It's not only to the designer. There is lineage there. So it is so important. I would like to take a moment to go back to the digital divide, because I don't want us to jump over that, because I think that is so important when you are thinking about the youth growing up, the next generations coming up, and not to dismiss the generations that are there, but what are we building when we speak about a digital, equity in digital, health equity, financial equity? That's all. How is that possible if you don't have the digital? And as you grow into an adult, into where you are now, are you already behind before you begin?
Very well said, Leslie. And yes, you are. The digital divide really starts impacting Native American students when they're in kindergarten, even preschool. A lot of Native students live in rural lands. A lot live in the city as well. Just like here in Seattle, you have a lot of non-tribal lands where Native American people live. But there's two characteristics to the digital divide. One is access to high-speed internet. So you have to have the financial means and live in a home where you can have high-speed internet. The second is access to reliable devices. I went to a tribal school when I was growing up. We certainly did not have devices. I will call out, this is a little bit before the internet and computer times, just to age myself a little bit.
We won't talk about that part.
Yeah, we don't have to dive into that. But access to reliable devices is a huge barrier. And I do believe there are a lot of companies that have really good intentions. They are building K through 12 computer science education programs and launching them, but they're not necessarily thinking about the students that don't have that access to high-speed internet and may not have tablets. They may not have computers at home. And that's something that you'll see as a common characteristic in a lot of Native American homes, is that they don't have a home computer. They don't have tablets. The kids may not have phones that they can access these programs on or take these online courses in. So K through 12, we really see that with these low income families that live in remote locations. They're not given tablets like a lot of students are. We do see that flowing into the college experience as well, where these students may not have access to things like virtual tutoring or have a device that they can take back to their dorm room. And so again, that's going to continue to impact them as they look for things like internship opportunities, mentorship programs. How can they even apply for that if they don't have access to a reliable device or high-speed internet? And then that does feed into the workplace, because then you're working with people that don't necessarily have access, again, to those mentorship programs. If they are job seeking, they may not be able to apply. And I'll just share a quick anecdote. Is when I left the Army, I returned to my homeland in the Quileute Nation. We didn't have phone access there. I didn't have a home computer. And there were so many online career fairs and webinars, and I couldn't access any of them. So I had to drive 30 miles into town to go to the library. And I would just spend all day there. Luckily, the librarian was really nice and let me use the computer all day. But that's the only way I had to access a lot of these employment career fairs.
And so for the companies that are listening, when you say, I don't know what to do, I'm tapped out, I don't know where to go, I don't know, I want to turn my intent into impact, this is a perfect opportunity.
It is.
To really sit back and say, how am I impacting not only a generation now, but the generations coming up? And then again, if you want to think about business, how do you build in loyalty into understanding that you're giving opportunity for growth?
Right. And there's a lot of things companies can do. For example, a lot of companies have life cycle programs with our laptops or our tablets that we use. And so what do they do with those devices once they reach the end of that life cycle? They may re-image them. A lot of companies are just destroying them. Those are things that you could re-image, put a lot less memory on it, but donate those to schools like this, because you are growing a workforce. I think that's really important. The other thing is, instead of, offering a computer science program, really talk to these communities about what they need, because it might not just be an online computer science program. They also could need school supplies. Right.
Speak to the people. Stop trying to help and act like you know. Again, that's what I'm saying. Stop speaking about and speak to.
Speak to them. Yes. Try to understand their needs. Also, like, we see a lot of computer science skill building mentorship programs dedicated to Native communities, but we also need to be prepared to support their mentors, their adult chaperones that are bringing them to these programs. A lot of times that means providing them meals, school supplies, clothes, so that they can attend these events, and basic hygiene items. Those are things that we need to make sure that we're addressing with these communities.
And that's why I said it's not only the digital divide, it's the health equity.
Health equity.
Means, financial equity. It is full cycle of an individual and not of a label for which, we are born into, we are who we are, right? Our culture is our culture. But it has to be more than checking boxes in regards to, this is how I'm going to help, as opposed to, this is the help that will actually invest in communities to be able to, one, show up, like you said, if it's a younger person, to have that adult be able to have food, or even have them have access to continue to work.
Yes. And that's actually a characteristic of the digital divide, I think, for many communities that I've read about too and heard about, is, when we educate our children in computer science, we do need to educate their parents as well. You can't just teach a 5-year-old child how to use a laptop and make it, do some coding. The parent also needs to be taught. And, for most parents, myself included, if I'm going somewhere with my child for a few days, I definitely, I have to take time away from work. I'm fortunate enough that I can use paid leave. Not everybody has that privilege. So, creating access, I think, is really important. And I always say this to everybody: you don't have to create something new. We're not asking you to create anything brand new and shiny. just look at what you're already doing and really examine it to make sure that it's accessible. Really look at why no Native American students have signed up, why you have no Native American interns, and try to solve those problems, because a lot of times it's things that you can fix, but you just may not be aware of.
Absolutely. And I love, for anyone that's listening and watching again, you made a great point. You have LinkedIn groups, you have Facebook groups. So
Yes.
if you're a company that says, "Oh, I just can't find people," they can never find us. Um,
We're out
if you
there.
if you were really looking to invest in people and to really say that you have made a commitment, then join a LinkedIn group and start paying attention to conversation first and begin to understand what the conversation is about and what people are looking for. Have your HR person expand beyond their current culture and go to a Facebook group or go to a LinkedIn group and just say, here are jobs. Does anyone suggest where I should be posting?
Mhm. Yeah, and get some advice on your job postings too. Like you said, I've had job postings that, say we're looking for Native American tribal members. And you might not actually mean people that are enrolled, but there's a lot of people that aren't applying because they think they don't qualify. There's also some language that can be biased in job postings, so it's important to get a lot of eyes on it and just give it that sanity check from different perspectives. It is totally okay to say, like, I just want to make sure I'm doing my best work. Can somebody just give this a look for me? And I think coming at it with that really just open willingness to learn is really important.
Absolutely. I do that a lot for my clients. It may be a letter that's going out and they're like, can you just check this letter? We just want to make sure
Yes,
it is an inclusive letter and that we're not in our emotions writing it,
right.
but that we're really being respectful. And I will stop whatever I'm doing to make sure that I'm giving them that opportunity because they've now set back and said, I want to do the best that I can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fawn, this conversation has been amazing. I could continue to speak to you forever. What and it's so hard to say what parting words would you like to share because I know there's probably so many, but what are the parting things you would like for people to think about or to know about or
Yeah, there is so much to share, and I could talk about this all day. I think just one last thing I wanted to impart is there are a lot of great organizations that are doing amazing work in these communities, both in technology and outside of technology industries as well. A few that comes to mind that I want everybody to just look into, and I'm asking people to support. ACES is a great one, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. So they support both professionals and students in computer science programs and professions, and they start really as young as preschool and starting to build those computer science skills. So they're a wonderful organization that anybody can be a part of. They have job boards where you can post jobs for Indigenous and Native American STEM professionals. So if you're looking to increase diversity, that's a good one. I'm also a member of SACNAS, the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in STEM. So similar type of remit as ACES out there doing really wonderful work. They also have a lot of mentorship programs. So if you're a large company, you don't have that senior leadership, but you have mentorship programs. Ask these companies to come and support your employees. Pay for your employees, your Native American and Indigenous employees, to go to these conferences so that they can get the professional development that they need that they might not be getting in your organizations. And that is okay. If you don't have these mentorship programs today, pay for them to go to these conferences so they can get that support.
so well said. Fawn, thank you. I look forward to our continued relationship. I'm here for you for whatever I can do. How can people find you before we go?
Well, I am on LinkedIn, so definitely look me up there. That's probably the best place to get in touch with me. I definitely welcome everybody to reach out and connect. And I have so much fun having these conversations. So happy to do this again sometime. Thank you.
Absolutely. Careful what you wish for on that one. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining. I really hope you listen to this podcast and watch this more than once. Fawn gave so much amazing information that you can use. It's real life opportunities to make a difference, to turn your intent into impact. As always, I'm Leslie Short, your host. of Visibility Unlimited and Visibility Unlimited Spotlight. Find us at the YouTube channel for the Kava Group and listen in all of your podcast stations. Thanks so much. Talk to you again soon.